Next up, the two branches of the state legislature have always had a complicated relationship. When it comes to lawmaking, the Massachusetts House and Senate are partners and part of a collective whole that acts as a counterweight to the governor. But they're also rivals who frequently have very different ideas about policymaking. Now that tension is coming to the fore thanks to a public spat between the two chairs of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, which right now isn't really operating as a joint committee in the traditional sense of the phrase. And if the disagreement spreads, it could have big implications for the legislature as a whole. I'm joined now by one of the principals, State Senator Mike Barrett, who is the Senate co-chair of the committee in question. Senator, thank you for being here. Can you start by giving me and our viewers a layperson-friendly description of what's going on with your committee right now?
Yeah. Well, imagine a two-family home, a two-family house. The family occupying one half has 2 kids, and the family occupying the other half has no kids. And the issue is who's going to mow the lawn. You can do it one of 2 ways, I guess. You could give each family an equal say and require agreement, which is the way it's traditionally been done and the way the Senate would like to see it continue. Or you can decide that overall majority votes will determine who mows the lawn. In that case, the family with 2 kids would always win. That's really what this is about. In the two-family situation, the House and the Senate, do both get an equal voice? Or do we switch to a majority, in which case one side always prevails?
Now, tell me if I've got this right. By the way, thank you for that. It's evocative, and I can wrap my brain around it, but I still want to make sure that we hammer out the details. So your counterpart, your House counterpart, Representative Jeff Roy, wants, tell me if I am getting this correct, he wants to let the majority decide not just when hearings are scheduled, but when the votes on bills are taken. Correct? And you
That's right.
do. It's the latter proposition that that they would be able to decide, or that a majority vote would decide when votes are taken, that you're especially taking issue with. Have I got that right?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, but the interesting question, if you want to take a half step back, is what is a joint committee and how do these joint committees work?
Thank you.
I can tell you that across the United States, the House in different states has one set of hearings, and the Senate in different states has another set of hearings, and then there's a conference committee to reconcile differences. We're almost unique. The Joint Committee puts senators and House members in the same room at the same time to hear witnesses and to make decisions. But here's the math. There are 160 members of the House. There are 40 members of the Senate. So simple majority rule, in my example, the family with 2 kids, would always win. And simple majority rule in the Massachusetts Legislature, if we ever were to go to that system as the House now proposes, the House would always prevail. We want the tried and true method to be used, which is to say each branch gets an equal voice, which requires that we reach consensus. That's the way it's always happened. We produced 2 landmark climate bills in 2021 and 2022 with this requirement of consensus, and I personally hope that we can return to that.
And you want that equal voice to be, again, when it comes to when votes are scheduled, right? Because ultimately when the vote happens, the House is still going to outnumber the Senate. Correct?
Well, you know, now we're getting into the weeds a little. Here's something that you could do, and it is done in the rules. You could require that a majority of the House members and a majority of the Senate members both agree. So simple majorities don't necessarily override the requirement of consensus in every case, but I'm getting too detailed.
And that would be a new way of doing it, right? That would be a new framework?
Well, actually, no. That is also used some in the current situation at times. But the key is, right now, it's consensus. Both sides have to agree. If we do go to simple majorities at all key moments, including deciding when to vote, then basically the House will always win. Now, the House has many good ideas on climate policy, the area that I focus on, but my Senate colleagues have a lot of good ideas too. Requiring the House and the Senate to agree on a final product is pretty constructive. Changing the rules of the game and going to simple majorities in every case would be the equivalent of half of a two-family house always deciding who's going to mow the grass.
I want to read from a statement that we got from your counterpart, the House co-chair, Jeff Roy. We asked him to be here for this discussion. He was not able to make it, but he did send us a statement which read in part, the discussion around committee rules should not prevent our committee from holding joint hearings on critical legislation. I strongly support committee rules that allow either chair to propose action on legislation, thereby preventing one chair from maintaining absolute control over which bills advance from committee and restoring the influence of each individual committee member in the legislative process. Two things I want to point out there. You just held a committee hearing that was separate from the House on, if I understand it correctly, among other things, legislation involving the siting of electrical charging stations for cars this past week. So the same set of experts spoke to you and your Senate colleagues, and then at a different time they spoke to Jeff Roy and his House colleagues. It sounds to me in that statement like the House co-chair is accusing you of either in practice or in intent exercising undue influence by taking your role as one of the two co-chairs and saying, no, we're not going to move ahead with this legislation. What's your response?
Well, it's called negotiating. Let's go back to my example. If each family in a two-family house has the ability to say, no, I don't want to mow the lawn that way, what has to then happen to reconcile differences is a negotiation. Both parties have equal say. If you really reverse engineer my friend's statement there, what he's really saying is he wants to take away the Senate's ability to insist on a negotiated outcome. He doesn't want one branch to be able to say, our ideas aren't being given equal sway here, let's continue the conversation. What Jeff is saying instead is, gee, I would like to always win. I never want these folks able to say, well, wait a second, I have the majority. There are 160 members in the Massachusetts House, only 40 senators. I want my majority to always prevail. I don't like it when these guys insist on an equal say.
You've been very public with your disagreement with the approach that Representative Roy wants to take. Is this same dynamic playing out in other joint committees right now?
Well, yes, because this is sometimes misconstrued as an argument between Jeff and I. I like Jeff. He and I are friends. We actually go back a ways, and we managed to negotiate a landmark climate bill just 12 months ago. What's new here is coming from above Jeff's head. The House handed out new rules that for the very first time destroy this two-family arrangement that I've described and instead would have simple majorities overriding in every joint committee. What's different is that Jeff is a very capable lawyer. He's a very smart person. He's a very competent person. He's decided to take this new House idea of simple majority rule to the extreme, to the max. And I'm simply saying, let's go with what's worked in the past. Let's make sure the Senate, even though we're outnumbered, has an equal say.
You've only got 15 seconds here. Are we going to hear more Senate co-chairs speaking out the way that you've been speaking out the past few weeks?
Many of them have been supportive. I think I'm the canary in the coal mine, and if that's the way it has to be, I'm comfortable with that.
All right, State Senator Mike Barrett, thank you for being here and explaining this.
Thank you very much.
That's it for tonight, but do come back next week